To prepare for Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, our Beit Midrash is preparing videos on the Sheish Zichirot, 6 memorials Jews are instructed to carry out perpetually. To sign up to receive emails with links to each video, please go to www.torontotorah.com/zikaron, Zikaron. Each of these videos is dedicated to those who fell in the creation and ongoing defense of the State of Israel. In addition, each video is dedicated in particular to a casualty from a specific conflict. This video is dedicated in memory of Private Arieh, Arik, Adir. Aryeh ben Tzvi, a Palmach fighter who was killed on May 15, 1948, at the age of 18. You can find out more about Private Adir by clicking on the links in the description below. With this video, I'd like to learn more about the impact of our Zichirot, of these memorials we maintain. Memory has a bad reputation because it's generally not trustworthy. We tend to be biased in what we choose to remember. We often remember events that aren't really relevant today. And frankly, people often lie about what they claim to remember. Voltaire is said to have said, history is, after all, only a pack of tricks we play upon the dead. Nonetheless, all of us get over this skepticism and we rely on memory, and not only for the sake of recalling particular facts and events, but in order to shape our identity. An infant remembers its mother's heartbeat, its mother's scent, and develops family attachments. Children remember what happens in their early interactions, and they develop healthy social behavior, or so we hope. Memories of foods, places, music tend to trigger strong reactions in us when we re-experience those original stimuli. In fact, in 1690, philosopher John Locke wrote somewhat controversially that our sense of self is made up entirely of that which we remember, so much so that if you don't remember it, it didn't happen. Now, Locke may have gone too far, but the bottom line is this. Memory is more than just a recollection of facts. Memory shapes our sense of self, our sense of who we are. And remembering our past in order to shape our identity is something we do as Jews. Professor Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, on page 5 of his work Zachor, notes that the term Zachor, or some form of it, the Hebrew word for memory, actually appears no fewer than 169 times biblically. That's our imperative to remember, to make memory part of our world. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, in the 7th volume of his collected writings, says that a Jew is responsible to remember not only our history, but world history, in order to ensure that we will have a sense of the full vision for what we are meant to become. This is why we have at least 6 zichirot, 6 mitzvot involving ongoing memorial, for which we are taught to overcome our natural skepticism regarding memory and to call to mind events and ideas which, as Locke said, will shape our identity. Beyond the information they provide, they shape our sense of who we are. Which brings me to the first of our Sheish Zichirot, the first of our memorials, the main subject of this video, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, the memorial of our departure from Egypt, which we invoke on all sorts of occasions and in all sorts of contexts throughout the Torah. We are familiar with it, of course, from Kiddush on Friday night, but many of our mitzvot, many of the Torah's commandments, are linked to recalling our departure from Egypt. In fact, there are 3 specific ways, which will be familiar to us from Pesach, which we observed so recently. There are 3 specific ways in which our identity is shaped by remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim. We may link them with Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, although I'll change the order a bit. Let's start with Maror. Maror, the bitter herbs, which we eat on Pesach, commemorate our slavery in Egypt. Many times the Torah reminds us of our slavery in Egypt and says we should remember being slaves in Egypt so that we will have an identity as people who have been slaves ourselves, have been strangers ourselves, and therefore we will sympathize with the vulnerable. Remembering leaving Egypt reminds us of who we are, that we have been weak, that we have been outcasts, and therefore we should look to remedy that situation for others. Second, Pesach, the miraculous departure from Egypt, the way in which God, even as he punished the Egyptians, spared us. And this embodies the idea of miracles, the fact that God is willing to perform miracles on our behalf. That's what Pesach gives us. That's the message of Pesach. And that's a second element of shaping our identity. We are the people who embrace a God who performs miracles, and we envision that God performing miracles for us. And then third, matzah, the journey after we leave Egypt, which the prophet Yirmiyahu describes as lechtech acharai bamidbar be'eretz lo ziruah, following God in the wilderness in a land that is unplanted, following God on faith. We remember that departure from Egypt when we remember the matzah, and that memory shapes our identity as people who will act on emunah, who will act on faith. So it is with all of our zechirot, all of our memorials. We remember our rebellions in the desert, we remember our war against our first national enemy of Amalek, we remember Shabbat, and as we remember these events from our past, that adds layers to our sense of national and personal self. Recognizing the flaws of memory, may we carefully learn not only the facts of history, but also the identity that those events give us, as we do with our departure from Egypt, when we remember to sympathize with those who suffer, when we remember that God performs miracles, and when we remember as well that we are people who followed God on faith. The same idea of memory forming identity is seen on Yom HaZikaron, as we recall those who have fallen, again, for the creation of the State of Israel and its defense ever since. When we remember these heroes, we see ourselves as well. These are our family. We see ourselves in them and we see them in us. And we recognize as well that we are capable of sacrificing for others. As we prepare for Yom HaZikaron, may we remember the sacrifice of Private Arieh Adir, and so recognize who we are and who we can become.